I never believed in love at first sight until the day Professor Morgan walked into that graduate seminar wearing a navy blazer and the kind of confidence that made the entire room fall silent. I was 24, a master's student drowning in research papers and existential dread about my thesis. She was 36, brilliant, untouchable, and about to turn my entire world upside down. But this isn't where our story begins. It begins 3 months later, on a sweltering June afternoon when I found myself alone with her in her office, my hands trembling as I tried to explain why I was dropping out of the program. What I didn't know was that she was about to make me an offer that would change both of our lives forever. Let me back up. My name is Alex, and I'd spent the entire spring semester completely mesmerized by Dr. Elena Morgan. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd sit in the third row of her contemporary literature seminar, pretending to take notes while actually watching the way she moved through the classroom like poetry in motion. She had this habit of running her fingers through her dark hair when she was making a particularly passionate point about Virginia Woolf or Toni Morrison, and I'd find myself completely lost in the gesture. I told myself it was just admiration. She was everything I wanted to be: accomplished, articulate, fearless in her opinions. The fact that my heart raced every time she said my name during class discussions was just nerves, right? The fact that I'd rewrite my papers 3 times hoping for more of her handwritten feedback in the margins was just academic ambition. I was lying to myself, of course, but I was good at it. I'd spent my entire life being good at lying to myself about who I was and what I wanted. The semester ended, and I thought that would be it. Summer would come. I'd work on my thesis from a safe distance, and these confusing feelings would fade like a sunburn. But then my funding fell through. The research grant I'd been counting on got cut, and suddenly I couldn't afford to continue the program. I was devastated. Not just because of the degree, but because it meant I'd never see her again. That's why I found myself in her office that June afternoon, trying to hold back tears as I explained the situation. Her office smelled like old books and jasmine tea, and the late afternoon sun was streaming through the window, making dust particles dance in the air between us. "I'm so sorry, Professor Morgan," I said, my voice cracking. "I know this puts you in a difficult position since you agreed to be my thesis advisor." She was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel completely transparent. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. "What if there was another way?" she asked. Professor Morgan leaned back in her chair, and I noticed for the first time how tired she looked. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there during the semester. "I'm working on a book this summer," she explained. "A critical analysis of queer narratives in 20th century literature. I could use a research assistant. It would pay enough to cover your tuition and living expenses for next year. The work would also count toward your thesis research." My heart stopped. "Are you serious?" "Completely. But there's a catch." She hesitated, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "I do most of my writing at my house in the Berkshires. You'd need to stay there for the summer. It's isolated, but it's beautiful, and I have a guest cottage you could use." "I know it's unconventional, but..." "Yes," I interrupted. "Absolutely yes." She laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Don't you want to think about it? It's 2.5 months in the middle of nowhere with your professor." "I don't need to think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is exactly what I need." What I didn't say was that spending a summer near her sounded like both a dream and a particular kind of torture. But I was willing to take that risk. 2 weeks later, I drove 3 hours north to her house. When I pulled up the long gravel driveway, I understood why she'd called it beautiful. The main house was a restored farmhouse surrounded by trees, with a wraparound porch and flower gardens that looked like something out of a painting. The guest cottage was 50 yards away, small but charming, with its own porch and a view of the mountains. Professor Morgan was waiting on the main porch, wearing jeans and a white linen shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked different here, softer somehow, more human. She helped me carry my bags to the cottage, and as we walked, she talked about the property, the hiking trails nearby, the farmer's market in town. "I want you to feel at home here," she said, as we reached the cottage door. "We'll work hard, but this summer should also be good for you," restorative. I had no idea how prophetic those words would be. The first week was all business. We fell into a routine. I'd come to the main house every morning at 9. We'd work until lunch, take a break, then continue until 5. My job was to track down sources, fact-check citations, and help her organize her research. But it was also so much more than that. We'd have these long, winding conversations about literature, about life, about the stories we tell ourselves and the truths we hide. She insisted I call her Elena when we weren't on campus. "We're colleagues this summer," she said. The professor-student dynamic feels wrong here, but nothing felt wrong. That was the problem. Everything felt incredibly, dangerously right. By the second week, our lunch breaks had gotten longer. We'd sit on the porch with sandwiches and iced tea, talking about everything except work. I learned that she'd grown up in Boston, that she'd almost become a painter before falling in love with literature, that she'd been married once, briefly, to a man who never really understood her. "I spent my 20s trying to be someone I wasn't," she told me one afternoon, her eyes distant. "It took me a long time to accept myself. To accept that I was never going to fit into the life everyone expected me to have." I knew exactly what she meant. I'd come out as bisexual in college, but I'd never really explored that part of myself. I'd had one girlfriend freshman year, but it ended badly, and I'd convinced myself it was easier to date men. Safer. Less complicated. "Do you ever regret the time you lost?" I asked. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I felt something shift in the air between us. "Every day," she said quietly. "But I try to focus on the time I have now. On being authentic, even when it's scary." The conversation moved on, but her words stayed with me. By the third week, the boundaries between work and friendship had completely blurred. We'd take breaks to go hiking, or we'd work on the porch in the evenings with wine and the sound of crickets. She started telling me stories about her life, her past relationships, her fears and dreams. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. My insecurities about my writing, my confusion about my own identity, the loneliness I'd felt for so long. One night, we were sitting on her porch steps watching the sunset, and she said, "Can I tell you something?" "Anything," I said. "You remind me of myself at your age. So much potential, so much fear. You're standing at the edge of something, Alex, and I can see you holding yourself back." "What am I holding myself back from?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "From being fully yourself. From taking risks. From wanting what you want without apology." My heart was pounding. What if I don't know what I want? She turned to look at me, and in the fading light, her eyes were impossibly soft. "I think you do. I think you're just afraid to admit it." After that night, something changed. The air between us felt electric, charged with all the things we weren't saying. We'd brush hands reaching for the same book, and the contact would linger a second too long. She'd touch my shoulder while reading over my work, and I'd forget how to breathe. I knew I was falling for her. I'd probably been falling for her since that first day in her seminar. But now it felt different, more real, more terrifying. Because I was starting to think maybe, just maybe she felt it too. One Friday evening in late July, we'd spent the afternoon working in a comfortable silence. Elena was editing a chapter, and I was sprawled on the floor of her office surrounded by research materials. A thunderstorm rolled in, one of those summer storms that shakes the windows and turns the world dark in the middle of the afternoon. "You should probably stay for dinner," Elena said, looking up from her laptop. "The roads get dangerous in storms like this." So I stayed. We cooked together, something simple with pasta and vegetables from her garden, moving around the kitchen in an easy rhythm. We ate at her dining table by candlelight because the power had flickered out, and we drank red wine and talked about everything and nothing. "I'm glad you're here," she said suddenly, in the middle of a story about a disastrous academic conference. "Not just for the work. I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I whispered. The rain pounded against the windows. The candles flickered, and Elena reached across the table and took my hand. "Alex," she said softly, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me about how you feel." "Can you do that?" I nodded, unable to speak. "This summer has been ... double quotes." She paused, searching for words. You've become incredibly important to me. More than I expected. More than is probably appropriate given our situation. And I need to know if I'm imagining this connection between us, or if you feel it too. I stared at her, at this brilliant, beautiful woman who was looking at me with such vulnerability in her eyes. And I made a choice. I chose honesty. I chose risk. I feel it, I said. I've felt it since the first day of your seminar. Maybe even before that. I've been trying so hard not to, but I can't help it, Elena. When I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I ever have with anyone else. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for weeks. Thank God, she whispered. I thought I was losing my mind. What do we do? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. This is complicated. I'm your professor. There are rules, ethics, power dynamics. But we're not on campus, I pointed out. And I'm not taking your class right now. And I'm 24 years old, Elena. I'm not some kid who doesn't know what she wants. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. I stood up and walked around the table to where she sat. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I want to stop pretending, I said. I want to stop lying to myself about what I feel. I want to take a risk on something real. She stood up to face me and we were inches apart. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear and desire warring with each other. If we do this, she said carefully, everything changes. Your thesis, our working relationship, everything. And if it doesn't work out, I put my finger gently against her lips. What if it does work out? She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. You make a compelling argument, researcher. And then she kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was giving me a chance to change my mind. But I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. I kissed her back, wrapping my arms around her neck, pouring months of longing into that moment. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. That was ... double quotes, she started. Worth the wait, I finished. We spent the rest of the night on her couch, talking and kissing and making plans. We agreed to keep things private until the fall semester ended and I officially graduated. We acknowledged that this was risky, complicated, and probably a little bit crazy. But we also both knew that what we'd found together was too rare, too real to walk away from out of fear. The rest of the summer was like living in a dream. We worked during the day, maintaining our professional routine, but the evenings were ours. We'd cook dinner together, take long walks in the woods, lie in a blanket in the backyard, counting stars. Elena taught me about constellations and ancient mythology. I taught her about the contemporary music and internet culture she'd missed while buried in academia. We talked about our past, our futures, our fears. She told me about the loneliness of being a woman in her field, about the pressure to be perfect, about the years she'd wasted hiding who she really was. I told her about growing up feeling like I never quite fit anywhere, about the paralysis of too many choices, about the terror of wanting something so badly you're afraid to reach for it. You're not afraid anymore, she observed one night as we lay together on her porch swing, my head on her shoulder. How do you know? I asked. Because you're here. Because you chose this. Because you're choosing yourself. She was right. Being with Elena had changed something fundamental in me. I'd spent so long being afraid of disappointing people, of making the wrong choice, of being too much or not enough. But with her, I felt free to be exactly who I was. She saw me completely and she loved what she saw. As August drew to a close, we had to face reality. In 2 weeks, the fall semester would start. I'd be back in her seminar. She'd be my thesis advisor officially. We'd have to be careful, professional, discreet. I hate this, I said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I hate that we have to hide. It's only for 1 semester, Elena reminded me. You graduate in December. Then we can figure out what comes next. And what does come next? She was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that. There's a position opening up at Columbia in the spring. They've asked me to apply. It would mean leaving the university, but it would also mean we wouldn't have to hide anymore. What would you think about moving to New York? I turned to look at her, my heart racing. Are you asking me to come with you? I'm asking if you'd want to build a life with me, she said simply. I know it's fast. I know we should probably be more cautious. But I'm done wasting time, Alex. I'm 43 years old, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. So yes, I'm asking. I kissed her, tasting salt from tears I hadn't realized I was crying. Yes, I said against her lips. 1,000 times yes. That was 5 years ago. Elena got the Columbia position. I finished my master's and followed her to New York, where I started a PhD program at NYU. We got married in a small ceremony in Central Park 2 years later, with our closest friends and Elena's sister as witnesses. She's working on her 3rd book now, and I'm defending my dissertation next month. We have an apartment in Brooklyn with a cat named Wolf and more bookshelves than wall space. We cook dinner together most nights, and we still talk for hours about literature and life and everything in between. People sometimes ask me if I regret the way our relationship started, if I worry about the ethics of falling in love with my professor. And I understand why they ask. But that's what I've learned. Life is too short to apologize for love that's real, honest, and mutual. We didn't do anything wrong. We were 2 adults who found each other at the right moment, who took a risk on something genuine. That summer in the Berkshires changed everything. It taught me that sometimes the scariest choices are the ones most worth making. It taught me that authenticity is always worth the risk. And it taught me that love, when it's real, doesn't follow a timeline or obey the rules. Elena still teaches, still inspires students the way she inspired me. And I'm building my own career now, finding my own voice. But at the end of every day, we come home to each other. We're partners, colleagues, best friends, and lovers. We're everything. If you're standing at the edge of something that scares you, if you holding yourself back from taking a risk because you afraid of what people will think or what might go wrong, I hope our story gives you courage. Life is happening right now. Choose yourself, choose love, choose authenticity. The best stories are the ones we're brave enough to live. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever taken a risk on love that changed your life? Are you standing at the edge of something right now, wondering if you should jump? Share your story with our community. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more LGBTQ love stories every week. Remember, your story matters, and you deserve to live it fully. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.